Recommendation on 5.7 to be received and referred to the selection committee, and Councillor Skelly.
Good morning, thank you. And through the chair, I have difficulty approving this today without more information. You know, there are so many questions that we have right now surrounding the Waterfront Trust. I've been asking for the 2016 financial statement. We haven't received it. But if we look at the situation at the end of 2015, the Waterfront Trust had less than $15,000 in cash and total assets of about $230,000. That was a drop of almost $450,000 from the year before. With that in mind, I know that we're in the midst of a lawsuit. Where is the trust getting the funds to cover the costs of hiring a lawyer? Is the city absorbing those costs? We haven't been told. I'm very concerned, as I said. I've asked for the 2016 financial statements. They haven't been provided. I don't even know if they're available. We're dealing with unpaid taxes, with the loss, which was really the annulment of its charitable status. You know, real or perceived, there appears to be a lack of transparency that has, you know, triggered a string of news reports in every single outlet in the city of Hamilton. And I want to refer to one in the Spectator recently. It was a column. And one of the references is, in 2015, the Spec, Steve Bust, reported a string of questionable spending items and inadequate answers at a time when the trust was seeking funding from the city of more than $300,000. Bust pointed out that the trust had lost, at the time, $2.5 million since 2007. He found many trust operations, Williams Fresh Cafe, formerly the Coffee Pub, the Hamilton Harbour Queen, which the trust eventually closed, and the Waterfront Trolley all appeared to have shaky financial oversight and reporting. I have received numerous inquiries from residents about the lack of what they claim, and I would agree, lack of transparency surrounding the trust. So in light of this, and because of this, I'm asking that instead of moving forward with this, I would like to see that this recommendation be referred back to GIC, and that we get all of the financial statements from 2012 through 2017 provided to Council in advance, and as well a presentation from the Hamilton Waterfront Trust regarding its next steps.
So is that a motion?
That'll be a motion, seconded by Councillor Brenda Johnson.
On the motion? Councillor Jackson.
So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I still believe that 5.7, because it's more of a governance issue, should still be referred to the governance subcommittee to demonstrate the two branches now of the Waterfront Trust. But we are more than willing and ready and available to come in and give the presentation, as we annually do the last several years, the Waterfront Trust. So I would humbly suggest, Mr. Deputy Mayor, that Councillor Skelly's motion would be a separate motion, and the Waterfront Trust is more than happy to come in the fall, as we have in the past. But I would humbly suggest, given the fact that we have now, working with CRA, we have split the Waterfront Trust into, this is more of a governance issue and an appointment issue down the road. So I would humbly suggest that both be separate, and I'm more than happy and willing on behalf of the Trust to make an appearance in the fall at a future GIC meeting. I would suggest that instead, Mr. Chairman, to keep them both separate. Thank you.
Yes, very good. I have myself on the speakers list, then you, Councillor Brenda Johnson. And then a second time for Skelly, unless anybody wants to go first time. And I need to give the chair to somebody. It would normally be Conley. He's at his daughter's wedding, so thank you, Councillor Collins. So through you to, it's really been an interesting summer, and as I know, I speak for Councillor Jackson, very proud Waterfront Trust Board member, very grateful for the many unanimous votes by this council and previous councils and previous mayors and this current mayor supporting the work that we do at the Waterfront Trust. We often talk amongst people who are devoted, and we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of volunteers doing things like just last weekend, the fishing derby, where thousands of kids get an opportunity to get out there and on just one weekend of many, many weekends fulfill our mandates of this council and councils past of getting people to the water's edge, to a place where you couldn't get a bottled water 14 years ago. Currently, obviously, that's not the case. We roughly average attendance around 800 to 1 million visitors. I'd happily put that beside our most successful rec centers, our conservation authorities, to which we subsidize to a much, much greater extent, into the millions, or the art gallery and their attendance, to which we subsidize to $1 million compared to the Waterfront Trust at about 340,000, let's say, which you all know because every year you unanimously receive the budgets that are being requested in part as this motion is sort of sprung up on us, and it clearly is based on these media reports that we've had of late, and the one referenced from, I think, a few years ago from the Hamilton Spectator. And certainly there's been no shortage of editorials in one other rag that's out there as well. So I'll I'm glad we have this opportunity. Caught off guard, certainly when any other council member has in the past, as far as I can see, has had inquiries by their constituents. They tend to maybe contact or reach out to the council members who are on the board, not through a horseshoe council committee. So you can clearly tell, a little caught off guard, but if that's the form certain people want to take, fair enough. I'm sure Media Row's having a real good time as they've had in the past with Waterfront Trust issues, but certainly with unanimous decision after unanimous decision that ultimately shows the support for the good hard work that we're doing down there, including the hundreds of volunteers. Let me just ask through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Zagaric. There's been a request in part for this motion for financials since 2012. They are, minus, say for 2016, which is pending, when our board, Councillor Jackson, myself, and others on the board get together and sign off on what is a audited statement, like every other year, third-party audited statement. I give 2 thumbs up, by the way, but I can't share that until it's public. Where can we help the movers of this motion to get some direction, to get in advance? Clearly you haven't been asked the question until now at this council meeting. Where can we get some assistance to them to look at past council-approved records on financial statements from the Waterfront Trust?
So through the chair, city staff can provide the 2012 to 2015 audited financial statements. We have those copies of those statements in our possession. With respect to the 2016 audited financial statements, my understanding is that the board has approved them. They have just yet to sign off on those audited financial statements. In terms of process, those statements are normally provided to council through a consent item. And again, that process could be followed, or they could be presented through a presentation or delegation. With respect to the taxes, property taxes, a payment was made by Hamilton Waterfront Trust in July of $177,000, and that leaves the outstanding taxes, penalty, and interest at about $334,000. For the periods 2016 and 17. So again, we can provide that information to council as well.
Okay. Thanks again, and you know, for those who may also be asking questions, or those who may have inquiries, many inquiries from your constituents, I'm an open door. Always my door is open. You're more than welcome to talk to me as a board member. I obviously have had conversations with some of you in the recent weeks, and it's pretty much regular practice, almost always. Certainly Councillor Jackson is the same as a proud board member. We're doing terrific things there. If folks are fashioning motions built around newspaper articles on what is clearly a slow summer for media, fair enough. Go for it. We have nothing to hide. Whatever this motion is intending to do, in a public forum, whether it's GIC, Audit and Finance, happy to attend, happy to, quite frankly, boast about the incredible work that we're doing. And ultimately, in this forum, through a process that's not a gotcha moment again, we'll be able to also demonstrate, I can assure you, that bringing the Waterfront Trust in-house, if that's the ultimate goal for some, and certainly has been alluded to during this slow news summer, you're going to find at least double the impact, if not much greater the impact to the taxpayers, as opposed to the limited subsidy that you have unanimously approved year over year. Thank you. I'll take the chair back. First time speaker Brenda Johnson, the seconder of this motion.
Yep, thank you very much. When I read 5.7, it looks like next steps. So to me, with all due respect, 5.7 is next steps, correct? This is where they want to divide the appointment of a certain person. It's part of their next steps, which I think is wonderful if we all heard it at the same time. That's why I backed up the motion. Maybe it should come to GIC, not to governance, and everybody get the same information at the same time. The finances is a one off the end, that if Councillor Skelly wants all the finances for the last 5 years, there it is, that's in that motion. We can choose to say, no, I don't need to see them, or yes, please send them to me. But that would be all part and parcel of their fall presentation. Next steps, financials, what are we doing, and continue on. So I wasn't reading that motion that Councillor, as the line of the motion was to bring next steps and for the financials to be provided. So that's the motion that I was, the preamble is out there, but the motion I thought was solid. And I think that's the same thing that the Waterfront Trust does every fall, but I think that it just adds a little bit more of the financial statements to be put ahead of time so people can have their questions to you. And before I finish, I do want to thank Councillor Jackson and Councillor Farr for all your hard work on this board. We all sit on many boards and there's lots of hard work involved. Waterfront Trust is a gem of this city. We don't want to lose it. We don't want it to have any more media out there that's going to make it sound like there's something suspicious going on. So this is a good way of just cleaning everything up and getting them here. Werner Pleschel and Mr. Charters have been amazingly open with all their information. So I think it just goes in part and parcel with what they've been doing in the past. So I still think that when I read 5.7, it's part of their next steps, and I believe coming to a GIC to explain all this, in my opinion, is not a bad idea.
Right. Again, 5.7, thank you, is correspondence from our ED at the Waterfront Trust respecting motion of increasing our number of appointees by the City of Hamilton to 5. Yeah, it's a board compliment motion. It's, anyway, just get that on the record again. First time speakers still to come, Councillor Green, Councillor Collins, and Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Green.
Thank you very much. Like all, projects that have tremendous complexity, given that this new complement is being put forward, maybe the mover of the motion may want to consider through the selection process joining the board to have a greater insight and scrutiny into the project. Further to that, if there's going to be a report back and there's conversations around what it might look like to bring it back in-house, then let's just do that right off the fly. Let's just have those numbers come back so that the general public can take a look at what the opportunities are. I'm not opposed to that by any means, but let's not flirt around the issues with innuendos or anything about improprieties. Let's just go ahead and have the full conversation with full transparency, the financials, the ability for us to bring it back if that's the direction that it was going in, because I'm in support of exploring those options and having everything on the table. Certainly can't make decisions until we have all that information forward. But as I said, given that this is a governance motion and that there is an opportunity to expand the board, if there are any councillors around the table that have a special interest in their file, I encourage them to put their names forward for the selection committee to sit on the board and to be a part of those decision-making motions, right? So that's kind of my twofold thoughts on these, but if we're going to talk about bringing it back in, let's just have the conversation right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to acknowledge that the concept of the Waterfront Trust and the many discussions that we've had around this horseshoe, it was pretty clear for the time that was the right decision to make. And then some subsequent decisions have been made and numbers are being provided. I think the backdrop, and it's not just about how we feel, because some of us are, in inside baseball, we know what's going on, but it's how it's been perceived through media and other outlets. We just had an ombudsman report talking about secrecy and camera discussions. We just had a consultant report, an audit report that showed that that we're not necessarily following all processes when contracts are let. when you use that as the backdrop, you can understand and appreciate that people, regardless of how well Waterfront Trust may be running, there has been some slips and falls, not expected. And the challenge is that I think we have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that the narrative that's out there is the correct narrative. And I think the challenge right now is that narrative is a bit muddied on the Waterfront Trust. So I think this is really an opportunity through this motion to have them come in, as the Deputy Mayor so eloquently put, talk about all the successes, because far too often we focus on the negatives. But we need to understand what those negatives are and what things have been put in place to address them. And I think this motion or the letter is addressing it by separating the two and looking for yet another appointment. But fundamentally and principally, I don't think anyone around this table would suggest, even for a moment, that the public get to see one narrative that's being told through the media lens. And I think having this motion followed through on, and having the presentation before this council, and having the shortfalls of that narrative, or at least that narrative not muddied but clarified, is doing a favor to this community. And that's why I would support that initiative. Thank you.
Second time, Councillor Skelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to clarify one of the reasons I'm raising these questions. It's it's B, therefore be it resolved B, that in addition, the Hamilton Waterfront Trust has agreed to manage the redevelopment of Piers 5 to 7 on Hamilton's waterfront in accordance with the approved Hamilton West Harbour Waterfront Recreation Master Plan. I haven't heard an argument as to why this can't be managed by city staff. I mean, what expertise does the Hamilton Waterfront Trust have that our own staff doesn't have? And I think that this, bringing it to GIC in a full presentation before we have our multi-million-dollar waterfront development handed to the Waterfront Trust, I think we need to have a much clearer understanding of why it's not being managed by city staff and why we aren't going to bring this in-house. I think that that's a very big project to just hand over. So for that as well, I would like to, and again, and I'll echo actually some of the comments that Councillor Whitehead said, I think it's important when we have so many issues and so many questions surrounding transparency in the Waterfront Trust, I think that this is a good opportunity to have clarification and their stance and their arguments and their plans and why we're going to keep it, why it's going to continue to exist and why they have a specific and what these, through the chair, what these areas of expertise are that are contained within the Waterfront Trust and why it can't be done in-house, especially in light of B in this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Jackson, second time.
I'll be brief, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I still would suggest to my colleagues we keep the two motions separate. One's about governance, the other one is about a full presentation of financials. Have no difficulty with that whatsoever. I actually look forward to it. On the B part, the project management agreement that the past term of council, including the past mayor, unanimously agreed to, gave these projects to the Waterfront Trust. Quite frankly, city staff haven't built the amenities the last 16 years at the West Harbour. The Waterfront Trust has done that. And in light of what one or two of my colleagues have recently discovered, with all the difficulties within city departments lately, the millions of dollars that are unaccounted for, oh my goodness, that's the last thing I would even consider doing, of bringing something in-house or letting a city department potentially operate it in light of this negative publicity that's really been before us lately, which has been uncovered. And Mr. Deputy Mayor, I've got the report in my office 13 years ago when two former colleagues of mine, using a quick analogy of animal control, when we had a fee-for-service contract with the SPCA for $1.2 million annually to operate animal control for the city of Hamilton outside of the rural areas, except for the rural areas which had their own animal services, and two of my former colleagues harped away long enough that a majority of council back then decided, you know what, That Taj Mahal on Dartnell Road, way too lucrative a contract, got to bring it in-house. The next year, city staff reported to set up their own new animal control department with managers and new QP wages. It was $800,000 more the next year to have our own department of animal control. I just put all that on the record as I look forward to the presentation in the fall, and also, but I would humbly suggest to keep 5-7 moving forward separately as governance. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, for allowing me my comments.
Yeah, it'd be great as a board member too for the Waterfront Trust. I'll take give the chair back to Councillor Collins and very quickly just thank the former speaker, Councillor Jackson, for pointing out the irony and for the subtle reference to the amenities that we've built to date. And what wasn't mentioned that I'll just quickly throw in is initially through a settlement with the Hamilton Harbour Commission, for those who are new to council, it was a roughly $6 million settlement. We established the Waterfront Trust, and we did something that also I think would be hard for in-house or the city to do. We leveraged the $6 million to $21 million worth of projects. And we did that through hard work of this and previous boards, and again, very proud board member of the Hamilton Waterfront Trust. So I will definitely support what's before us with respect to 5.7 in the correspondence. And at this point, take the chair back, and as Deputy Mayor asked, that I guess we deal first with the motion, and if we could hear the motion one more time. Since the is the motion that's before us through to the clerk intended to change or alter 5.7 in any way?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, the request on the communication is with regards to the
to receive and refer to the selection.
Well, it's about the appointment process. They're asking council to approve the recommendation on the appointment process. So that we suggest would be appropriate to send to a governance committee to look at that piece. The more detailed motion that Councillor Skelly is proposing could be a separate motion because it is more detailed and with the request to come forward to GIC.
So it doesn't alter 5.7. So 5.7 is before us?
Yeah.
Moved by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Partridge. On the motion?
They are, Mr. Chair, a companion piece because I would think, and I'm a big supporter of the Waterfront Trust, so I'm going to put that out now, but I'm just talking process. If, in fact, we're moving in a different direction, and that's what it's asking us to facilitate, and there's questions about the current operation that needs to be flushed out through this council and may change the direction, then it might be premature to be addressing what's before us. So they are somewhat related in the context of the discussion, and I just want to highlight that.
Thank you. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, and my preference would be to separate them out because, you know, clearly 5.7 is about governance. And, you know, the request is to refer to the governance committee, which is transparency, I think, at its very best. And I think the other motion is more directed to financial clarity and, again, some transparency that the councillor is asking for. So I think they're two totally separate motions, and we should keep them that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and I certainly agree that and appreciate that they should be two separate motions. I support that, and let governance deal with the governance component of it. It reports to GIC, so it would be most appropriate to have it follow that course, and it could line up with the report in September as well. Okay.
Do lots of media show up to governance too? Okay. All right, so that's up to the mover, but right now before us we have 5.7. Good. Yeah, of course Joey will be there. And that's seconded by Councillor Partridge. All in favor? Who's opposed? Opposed is Councillor Skelly. And then I go to Councillor Skelly's motion now. Rose?
Through the chair. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Brenda Johnson, that 5.7 be referred back to GIC to address financial statements provided 2012 to 2017. So that financial statements 2012 through 2017 be provided to Council, inclusive of 2017, and that a presentation by Hamilton Waterfront Trust be made at the next GIC.
On the motion, Councillor Partridge. And that's seconded by, sorry?
Brenda Johnson.
Councillor Brenda Johnson.
Yeah, I just don't think 5.7 should be included in that motion because it's redundant. But the other thing is you can't do financial statements for 2017 because it's only halfway through 2017. So, and even to 2016, you know, they should be able to provide those. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anybody else on the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. And I want to recognize a former cabinet minister and great councillor, Brad Clark, who is also here. We caught Scotty over there. I see Brad's also in the house.